gentlemen, welcome to another fantasy show. What are we looking at here? Wednesday, April 16th, 8 days before the draft. The sky is falling, the floor is raising, whatever it is you want to be. We've got some absolutely magic to make in these next few days because after this, we're all technically proven wrong. All of our mocks, all of our fantasies, all of our wishes, our wants, our evaluations of free agents, all that. It's all been for naught unless you're geniuses. And speaking of geniuses, I've got one heck of a one as a guest tonight, guys. I busted out the big guns. You're going to know him as just the absolute man. He is a Fantasy Points lead analyst. He has been doing work for every platform that you can possibly imagine. I know him as the guy who said, oh, this guy's working for Player Profiler. I got to get the hell out of here. Please welcome to the stage the OG Fantasy, Theo Gremminger. Theo, how you doing, bud?
So I'll take some credit. I mean, I think I'm the guy, one of the guys who got you in the mix over here. So like, it's great seeing you crushing it, and I'm happy to be back. A big shout out to the Player Profiler audience. Yeah, I'm stoked to chop it up with you. It's sort of like the silly season. Tomorrow is like the 1 week away from the NFL draft, so it's like constant news, constant drum beats. I'm so excited to actually see the landing spots. I feel like we've done so many mock drafts, so much like hypotheticals. The hypotheticals are super fun. But it's even more fun when we get to actually do like the big shuffle between the actual NFL draft and Dynasty rookie drafts, where we've had like 3 months to prepare, and then you have like 6 days to reshuffle everything. So I love it.
I do too. So I have to ask you, how, as we get closer to this thing, are you feeling comfortable? Are you feeling crystallized with your thoughts? You kind of have, I've processed all the information and I'm ready for this, or are you finding yourself fluctuating on a few guys or anything like that?
I think that there is going to potentially be a huge dynasty price correction in Jalen Milroe, where Milroe was a guy where we thought maybe he could slide. Now there seems to be a lot of steam. I think that the sort of the ecosystem for the quarterbacks right now is beneficial to Milroe. Teams like Pittsburgh are sort of like a little bit under the gun here. And then you have teams like New York who might not end up with a quarterback who could potentially trade back in. So I think like everything's sort of set up for Milroe to get like top 40 draft capital. There's a couple other guys here and there. I actually think it's going to be the NFL is going to care more about this quarterback class than maybe the dynasty community and the redraft community did for the last 3 months.
Yeah,
it's just getting those guys on the rookie contracts. And I think Tyler Shuck's going to go a little bit higher than some people think as well. So yeah, completely ready for it. I mean, honestly, it's the running backs, though. There's so many guys we like in this class, and there's so few like perfectly clean landing spots. So that's sort of for me, that's going to be sort of the end all be all when we get to it. But yeah, it's the quarterbacks for me. It's like every year we think these guys are going to slide, and at the end of the day, we could end up with 4 quarterbacks in the first round again.
Yeah, and that's something that if that was a hot take a month ago, talking about where's Shedeur going to go has been a big mystery. Of course, Jackson Dart, I mean, you flip a coin depending on who you talk to. That's going to be a big one. And then Milroe sneaking up, and I'm glad you brought up Tyler Shuck. I mean, these are guys that have generated real buzz. And I think that shows the disconnect between what maybe we project as prospects versus the heat a lot of these teams are feeling and the pressure cooker that's been going on. I mean, you talk about this whole Kirk Cousins situation, this whole Aaron Rodgers situation. The Giants don't really solve any of their quarterback issues, even though they signed 2 of them. I mean, there's just so many balls up in the air. And I'm glad you brought up the running backs as well. That's been what I have found to be the easiest conversation to have, because there's a lot of talented players and a lot of teams that you can see pouncing on them. Today, we're going to be talking wide receivers and specifically dream spots. Theo, I don't know about you. I'm a 34-year-old man. I don't get what I want all the time, not even maybe a quarter of the time. So tonight we're doing dream landing spots. We're going to get what we want. We're going to paint the picture. You've come to me with 5 guys. You talked about this is what I want. This is where they're going to be. This is where they're going to fit in. So I guess I'll just ask you up front, when you saw this topic for the show, did you kind of have 5 guys that you were already baked into mentally, like, I would love this? Or did you do a little, maybe a little wheel spinning? Tell me about your thought process for this.
Well, you're sort of, if you're doing enough podcasts or enough articles, you're sort of contractually obligated to have had a dream landing spots kind of content. So I've gone through this a few times. I think when it comes to wide receivers, we get so caught up into landing spots, the quarterbacks, the offensive coordinators. Those things can change year to year. But what we really want to see that's static is we want top 50 draft capital. The hit rate for wide receivers that go inside the top 50 versus guys that go outside the top 50, it's like a huge difference. So if you're rooting for a wide receiver in this draft class, you're really rooting for that top 50 draft capital. I mean, you could certainly stretch that out a little bit, and you could make a case, hey, look at all these great landing spots end of the second round. Let's stretch it to the end of the second. So specifically, I want to see my guys land in the second round. That's been the easiest way to kind of get them fantasy viable. And I think it's been a wide receiver class that's been beat up, but every single year we're seeing rookie wide receivers hit. And I think when NFL teams draft guys with that sort of draft capital, it fast tracks them to getting targets, to getting on the field, and they have a longer leash to fail with as well. So for me, it's the dream landing spots. I'm all about it, but it's let's get that draft capital and let things sort of shuffle their way through.
Yep, and that'll be exciting to see this year. Last year, there was a pretty good run on wide receivers, and this is kind of and just something I was thinking about that I thought was an interesting note. We had, going into last year, we had, what did I just say? We had 12 picks in the first 65 for wide receivers. And when you really look at who made the picks and how their wide receiver rooms look this year, it's a lot of teams that actually still could take another swing at wide receiver early. We're looking at, who do we have here? The Cardinals, Giants, Jaguars, Panthers, Bills, Chargers, Patriots, Colts, Jets, and to a lesser extent, the Chiefs and the 49ers. 3 of those teams also took a wide receiver pretty high in the first 50 picks in the previous draft, being the Chargers, Panthers, and Chiefs. So I just really wonder, of all those teams, who a lot of people might look at it and say, oh, they took a wide receiver pretty high last year. Let's write them off. They might not need one. A lot of those wide receiver rooms still lack a quality second starter, even a quality, a passable third starter. Are there any teams that you're just praying, please just take another swing at this bad boy?
I mean, I think there's a number of them. If we're looking at the quarterback position, I think that there's a number of these teams that we're not necessarily predicting are going to draft a wide receiver. I think for me, the team that I don't think is going to draft a wide receiver in the first round, but I think could really use one of these guys, is certainly the Buffalo Bills. We saw all the success that Stephon Diggs had in Buffalo. We've seen Josh Allen elevate other players. Khalil Shakir certainly is punching above his weight class from where he was drafted. Even go back in the day, guys like John Brown, guys like Cole Beasley had their best fantasy seasons attached to Josh Allen. And I don't think they're necessarily going to go that route. They gave Josh Palmer the money. They drafted Keon Coleman last year. But this has also been a team that every year Buffalo's drafted a skill position player on day 1 or day 2. Maybe there's a chance if one of these wide receivers slide and they get close to where they're drafting at 30, Buffalo could make a slight move up. And for the people saying, Buffalo really needs that cornerback, they really need that safety, maybe they need an interior pass rusher, they have those 2 picks in the second round as well. And Buffalo has a ton of picks in general. Like no team has more 4th and 5th round picks. Maybe they could shuffle, get what they want. So for me, I'm really rooting for Buffalo to draft a wide receiver. Don't necessarily think they're going to do it though.
I'm right there with you. This is a team that I think a lot of us, we looked at their signings over with the acquisitions between Amari Cooper and Joshua Palmer, and of course extending Shakir, like you alluded to, and we said, okay, but it's kind of an exhale more than it is an inhale, or maybe the opposite, an inhale more than it is an exhale. What else you got? We know this is always going to be a top 5 offense under Josh Allen, but we'd really love to see them make a splash, maybe get back to those Stephon Diggs days. So let's get into the meat of this bad boy. Before we do, though, Theo, there's something you're very familiar with. I'm familiar with. We're all familiar about it. You guys are looking at a little code in the bottom right of your screen here. Let's get a little fast draft action going, and let's get it going.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Jimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite player profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
Seabass said that.
Well, if that guy at the table over there is Seabass.
100% match up the $50 off for anybody who wants to get over to Fast Draft and get that promo code in. If you want to take my money, Theo, I don't know how much you have in the pot over there. I would hate for
I'm in New York, so I can't play, and I can't play Underdog. I can't play Fast Draft. I can't play any of them. But the code Theo still works. If you want to take money right out of Chuck's pocket, the code Theo still works. And a big shout out to your code. The code Seabass, it works for the meme, but the code Chuck would have been like, an easy one for people to remember there.
Yeah, I can't get out of my own way, especially for audio listeners who are going to type in SEABASS. It seems that I cannot find a way to financially benefit myself in these situations. But I think that's what people like about me. If I start wearing nicer clothes or my studio background improves in any meaningful way, I think I'm going to lose viewers here. So I've always presented myself as the worst at everything that I do. So I want my viewers to continue to have that edge up on me. So if they can use your promo code, take money out of my pocket, take money out of my purse, my winnings, boy, everybody except me is a winner in that situation. So I'll be happy for that, and I'll be happy for all them. So let's pop into the chat real quick before we dive into some of these bad boys, because we've got a few mentions here, and a couple of them we're not going to be doing too much talking about. So maybe just a quick hitter on these before we jump into the meat of the segment. Chet wants to know Jalen Noel to the Texans. Now, this does tip the cap a little bit about maybe the first wide receiver we'll talk about. Do you have a perfect fit for Jalen Noel? Do you like him in a Texan scheme? Kind of what's your quick take on him?
I mean, I think when it comes to Jalen Noel, like I've been really, really high on him throughout the entire process. I think Jacksonville at 36 would be an ideal spot for him. I don't think Houston pulls the trigger at 25, and then Houston doesn't pick again until 58. So there'd have to be a little bit of maneuvering. I think Jalen Noel goes somewhere in that, that sweet spot, that early second to like the mid, that Seattle has the two picks, 50 and 52. I think he goes probably somewhere between 33 and 52. So for me, when I look at the teams in that spot, Jacksonville, Parker Washington was a 6th round pick. He's sort of been a guy who's done some things on an NFL field. It seems like they kind of like him organizationally, but that being said, he's not a guy that would box out Jalen Noel at all. And then I look at the kind of the team itself. Noel would be on a path to end up getting potentially a top 2 target right behind Brian Thomas Jr. So I love Noel landing anywhere where he's going to get some slot usage, but he's also going to be on a team where he's potentially the number 2 target on the team. I think he's got big fantasy potential.
I love that. And I think that he is that's a position in Jacksonville that they have been struggling to nail down for a while now. Twitchy slot guy getting out of there. I mean, like Christian Kirk out the door. They're clearly, and that was a position that was very successful for them when they were able to capitalize on it. And of course, that's somebody who will, for the next 5 to 7 years, playing across from Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, you talk about living the high life. That's going to be fantastic. I've got one more here. Slashy wants to know Isaiah Bond, Chiefs. Now, this one, I don't know if this is a comical pairing because the Chiefs tend to favor guys who have that I just turned myself into the authorities thing going on, or if he is talking stylistically about their mesh, which isn't bad either. How do you feel about this one, or is there a better spot for Isaiah Bond?
I mean, 5th round pick number 153 to the Cincinnati Bengals to compete with Jermaine Burton next year. That's the spot for Isaiah Bond right now.
I love it. So they are in a literal and metaphorical arms race. I like that. The Chiefs and the Bengals are always trying to find a way to one up each other in these avenues. I can't get enough of that. Fantastic answer. All right. Now your first one is a guy that I think are enough people talking about him. Yes. Are they talking about him with the passion that I wish that they were? I don't believe so. So tell us about your first dream pairing for a wide receiver rookie.
So I think this one's pretty simple. Everybody says Emeka Egbuka is not getting past pick 25 because he's going to go 25th overall. I think there's a chance that the Chargers take him a few picks before. He's been sort of linked to them. Fantasy-wise, though, ending up in Houston at pick number 25, this is a great spot for him. Houston has a lack of target earning tight end, and Christian Kirk was traded. They acquired him for a 7th round pick. The wide receiver 2 in Houston has been a big source of fantasy points for us with multiple players. Certainly Tank Dell during his rookie season, Noah Brown, and then last year Stephon Diggs in a role that Emeka Egbuka could step right into in that sort of low ADOT role. Diggs was able to give us 15 points per game for about half of the season. I think Egbuka, when you talk about the locker room narrative or the shower narrative, whatever you want to call your narrative, this guy has caught passes from CJ Stroud before. You get the Ohio State connection there. I think that this is a pick that would make CJ Stroud very happy, sort of give him a chance to get back to that magic that he had as a rookie. Last year, a little bit of a disappointment for him. He's still winning NFL football games, but for fantasy football, big-time disappointment season. Getting Egbuka and pairing him with Nico Collins, it would be a really, really good outcome for him. He would immediately step into that slot role, that power slot role. He could end up being sort of like Rashee Rice was for Kansas City in Houston. I love everything about Egbuka being attached to Houston. If he's there at 25, I think they pull the trigger, and it's a pairing that we can get very, very excited about.
I could not agree more. I think that this is going to be a defense that's going to be set up for a long time under very smart coaching, and they've already invested heavily on that side of the ball. And I think they got a real awakening really early on what happens when the offensive personnel isn't there. It's just a new NFL era, right? CJ Stroud has the potential to be a top quarterback. And we saw, I'm glad you spoke positively of Stephon Diggs' role with them last year, because there was a lot to be encouraged for an older wide receiver playing across from Nico Collins. So there's a ton of opportunity there. I think Egbuka immediately raises the floor. Probably the most pro-ready prospect coming in. He does a lot of things that I think that this team, from a veteran perspective, would utilize early. I know that they are bringing in a new offensive coordinator with Nick Caley, but one that a lot of people expect to honestly maybe even only be there for 1 year and potentially become a head coach after this. There's a lot of praise for him, a lot of praise for what he did in the passing game in his time with the Rams. And you really cannot find a better team than the Rams to consistently feature two wide receivers, basically play to play. So I love this pick. That's a great one. So are you personally high on Egbuka compared to maybe the consensus, or do you just love this fit?
I think I've sort of been in line with consensus with Egbuka. I've had him usually somewhere around like wide receiver 2 in this class. Now with the Travis Hunter sort of playing the position, there's a little bit of adjustment for me. I'm a little bit higher on Matthew Golden than I think some in fantasy football right now who just want to bury the guy for whatever reason. But I think Egbuka is, the way that I look at Egbuka is, I think you're going to have multiple seasons of wide receiver 2 production. I don't know if he's going to give you that wide receiver 1 production. I think he's a sort of a little bit of a cap ceiling guy. The argument against that is, if an offensive coordinator says this year we're going to pepper Egbuka with targets and we're going to sort of build the passing game around him, you've seen in the past, guys like Rashee Rice, Jackson Smith and Jigba last year, 100 catches. And then certainly the biggest argument for this sort of profile hitting is Cooper Kupp in sort of the perfect dream connection, like you said, with the Ram system. So for me, like, I'm in on Egbuka. I just think that if you're drafting him thinking this is going to be a league-winning pick for you, I don't think that's it. If you're drafting him thinking I can start him on my Dynasty team maybe for 5 years and get great flex production, get great wide receiver 2 production, then I think that's fine. So I'd say I'm pro Egbuka, but I think I have realistic expectations.
I like that. I like that a whole lot. I think they're going to get a souped up Jarvis Landry, who was never a league winner, but he was never a guy you were benching when he was in his prime. So I love that a whole lot. And I think that's going to be something I hope people are really paying attention to. And I really hope I think he's team proof compared to a lot of these other guys as far as NFL career goes. I just, the selfish man that I am, I hope he lands with the right spot. So let's move on to your next one here. That's a great start. Tell us about your second one, which is really a fascinating one because you know what? And I will tip the team here, but I won't tip the player. I guess we're burying Treylon Burks. I guess we can officially have the funeral.
You can sell your jersey on eBay, Chuck. You can get rid of it. The rebound's not going to happen. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Tennessee is one of the low-key better wide receiver landing spots. It's sort of like we've seen this before where team drafts quarterback and then team adds a pass catcher with like the very next pick. It doesn't always work out. I mean, certainly Bryce Young, dynasty managers, would have wished that Carolina took somebody besides Jonathan Mingo right after him a few years back. But I think when you look at Tennessee, they tried to go the very old wide receiver route last year. DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, and of course, Calvin Ridley with the monster contract. This year, Nick Westbrook-Akine is gone. Right now, it's like Calvin Ridley is really the only player you can bank on in that wide receiver room.
Mhm.
I think that like we're rooting for a number of these guys to land there. You get a very, very early pick. This is the 35th overall pick. And I'm saying Jaden Higgins. Jaden
Mm.
Higgins there, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think he's actually very versatile. This is a player that I think he could be a big slot at the next level. He didn't play predominantly inside because Jalen Noel was an awesome slot receiver
Mm.
for Iowa State. But even alongside a wide receiver that we really like Jalen Noel, like Higgins outperformed him. They were both over 80 catches last year. But Higgins is a guy where he tested very well at the NFL Combine. He performed very well at the Senior Bowl. He's got the size. He's got the wingspan. And I think when it comes to Tennessee, it's a team that severely lacks youth, speed. Like they lack talent. They lack everything at the wide receiver spot besides Ridley. If you're going to invest a number 1 overall pick on Cam Ward, I actually think that they're probably one of the teams that's most likely to draft 2 wide receivers. I think they used the 2nd round pick and they draft somebody else on day 3. I think there's a chance we go into the season where they're like wide receiver 2 and their wide receiver 4 are both rookies. So for me, Jaden Higgins would be on that fast track, would go right in the same wheelhouse that we saw T. Higgins go years back in Cincinnati. You get the Higgins to Higgins connection.
Yep.
And I think for me, it's Jaden Higgins. When we look at Calvin Ridley, I think Ridley's a little bit underrated in like best ball right now.
Yep.
I think that Ward's going to sort of keep him right in that fantasy relevant wheelhouse. But next year, heading into 2026, Jaden Higgins might be the wide receiver 1 in Tennessee if he makes this landing spot early in the 2nd round.
I love that. And I especially love the Joe Burrow, T. Higgins parallels because it's important for a lot of people to remember that, Joe Burrow didn't come into the league as this polished, intermediate, deep down the field, I'm going to crush you on every play. They were basically death by 1,000 paper cuts for his rookie year. And it was effective. But once they provided him with the personnel between Higgins and Chase, and they really built something, they were able to really step up. And of course, that's something that, Callahan comes from Cincinnati as well. I love this fit. I love them going youth. I think enough time has passed organizationally since the Treylon Burks pick. New front office, of course. So perhaps it's time for them to make their move. And this is a defense that was very encouraging last year. There wasn't a lot of bright spots in Tennessee. It wasn't a whole. There's a reason they have the 1st overall pick, but they certainly punched above their weight defensively. So I do think offensive personnel twice, maybe even 3 times in their first few rounds could really jump this up. So you do like him playing across from Calvin Ridley? Because I have heard some hesitation towards overlapping X's and X's.
I think Higgins is more than that. I think Higgins can play multiple spots, and I think Higgins does have the ability to bump inside. Sure. Like there's a little bit. It's not. I'm not trying to like overhype the player, but there's a little bit of Michael Thomas to him in terms of that size player that can win on the inside. I think Higgins is more versatile than that, and I think you need to have multiple wide receivers who can get the job done for Ward. So for me, like I don't want to box Higgins into this is just some big outside X wide receiver. I think he's a little bit more versatile than that. I think he can win in a number of ways. I think he's going to be a good player in the red zone. He can win deep. But what's most intriguing to me is he's a wide receiver with size that I think could at one point in his career absorb a pretty high number of targets. Highly targeted this year. I mean, a guy with that profile getting over 80 receptions is big time at the college level.
Absolutely. He seems to be as Iowa State just backdooring themselves into having wide receiver production. We're talking about two of the first 3 guys we've talked about, one of them off the show sheet, of course. Just a really, really exciting time to be a fan of that team. So let's get into your next one here, because this is one that you can ask 50 people how they feel about this prospect, and you're going to get 50 different answers. Tell us about your next pick.
Yeah, so my next pick on the list is Luther Burden, who's been a guy that I was sort of down on, but I think the fact, like, it's all relative. When we first started the process, it was like, do I want to use the 5th pick in my Dynasty rookie draft on Luther Burden? No, I have sort of big hesitations there. But now that the market sort of really corrected, I think he's actually going to end up in a range where he could be a hit. The chances of him going inside the 1st round have gone down significantly. I would actually be a little bit surprised if an NFL team calls his name in the first round. I think he's more likely going to go in this beginning of the second round draft capital spot. Tennessee could have been a spot for him. When we look at Luther Burden, the knock on him is that he's a guy that's going to need manufactured touches. He's a guy that's going to need to play the slot. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think some of that was a result of the Missouri system.
Love it.
The guy's explosive. And when we talk about athletic ability, we're talking about a low 4'4" guy who weighed in at 205 pounds at 6 feet tall. So like Burden athletically is right there, but you still want to get him a spot where a team's going to feature him, use him in the slot, get him those manufactured touches. I think that if Burden can play outside, but I do think he's going to be most effective inside with the ability to have some versatility to him. And when I look at a team picking inside of the second round where his skill set could be highly utilized, it's been a lot of turn back the clock this offseason in New England. And I think New England at 38 makes a ton of sense. New England could go and get their offensive lineman of choice at 4, or if for whatever reason Abdul Carter slides to 4, they can take Carter at 4. They need to get players around Drake May, not only offensive linemen, you need skill position players as well. And when you look at Josh McDaniels as offensive coordinator, Mike Vrabel as the head coach, you start thinking about insane slot wide receiver usage. Guys like Wes Welker, guys like Julian Edelman. I think Luther Burden as like a supercharged slot who can bump outside for like 30% of the time, play like a 60% slot role. I like that fit a lot. And when you look at his competition inside in New England, you're talking about like Pop Douglas, guys like that. Burden would annihilate those guys. And Stephon Diggs has been as a little bit of an overlapping skill set at this point in his career. We saw how Houston utilized Diggs. I think that's probably what he's best at now. But when you look at Diggs, despite getting the big contract, Diggs is a guy that's over 30 years old. Get Burden on that team, attach him to Drake May, worry about who's around him later, and worry about his possible featured role as a rookie. I think that would be a nice, like, falls to the second round, but ends up getting a really fun landing spot pick for Burden.
Sure. I couldn't agree more. It's actually frustrating how much I agree with all three of your picks so far. I was hoping for a little bit of pushback. I even had a little bit of whiskey because it makes me more aggressive. But I sadly, you're 3 for 3 in the Chuck.
You're agreeing very, very aggressively. It's a very aggressive, like, friendly agreement.
I'm jumping to it. You know what? Actually, I love Kayshon Boutte. I love Jalen Polk. No, I can't fake it. I have viewers who have to trust my credibility at some point here. Javon Baker may make people get out in wheelchairs, stand up, but he hasn't done anything for me. I don't know about you either. Doesn't feel like it's coming.
It's hard to bet on Jalen Polk or Javon Baker. Also, there's nothing there that Mike Vrabel or Josh McDaniel have to use.
Correct.
I actually think like Kayshon Boutte is younger than those two guys and was much better than those two guys last year. So I'm sort of out on either one of those guys having a big rebound year with Vrabel. Yeah,
it's tough to find something positive to say, especially considering they had the opportunity to do so, and I mean, just all the metrics and all the eye test tells you that it's not coming. I love this pick because it does feel like they've been trying to piecemeal together athleticism, especially freak athleticism, with this wide receiver core. They haven't been able to find somebody who can put together all of the traits, and I think they're going to get somebody that I do believe is a first-round talent that's going to fall for. I think misperceptions. His tape from 2023 is amongst the best tape that anybody in this class can put together. And then you mentioned, and I think you have to drive this point home, what was going on with this Missouri passing offense this last year was pitiful, hard to watch, and almost, I hate to excuse anybody who could be considered pulling down on the throttle a little bit, but if you're going to, that was the situation to do it. So they could be backdooring themselves into a first-round player in that early second that I think can contribute immediately, and I think could complement Diggs pretty well, assuming that we're getting some version of Diggs that has shown his head over the last little bit. Yeah. All right, here. What do we got? And the chat agrees. The chat said, Chet said, do we get rid of our Javon Baker stock? If you can get rid of it, I don't know what the market is for that. Perhaps, if you're selling something on Facebook Marketplace, maybe you can package that as part of the deal. I found that to be very beneficial, and Chet's loving the chat so far. So let's get to our next one here, and hopefully we'll go. Yes, finally we get to go 3 for 4 instead of 4 for 4 here. Tell us about your next pick here, and actually, I would also love to know, maybe this is just coincidental or not, why he's the 4th guy we're getting to in this, as opposed to maybe the 1st or 2nd.
Completely coincidental,
Okay.
and not in terms of enthusiasm. So like Matthew Golden, I don't think he goes in this range. I actually think that there's a much better chance that he's going inside of the top 15 than falling to this range. But when we talk about Matthew Golden, it's like there's some parallels to where the community was at on Ladd McConkey last year, where it's a guy that's hyper athletic, that never really had that massive college production. Ladd McConkey never, like, so the analytics people hate when I make this comment, because they'll say, like, look at the yards per route run, look at like all sorts of little analytical measurements when it comes to McConkey were there. But McConkey was also an older wide receiver that was a guy that never really had that college production. So it was a bit of a projection. Now, everybody very wisely kind of reshuffled the deck. And when he had the landing spot to LA, clear path to the wide receiver 1. Everybody loves Ladd McConkey again, but there was, people with some receipts, not necessarily a player profiler. We weren't last year knocking McConkey. Like, we were all pretty high on him.
Sure.
Matt, Cody, and I at the time we're all pretty high on McConkey, but there were some other sites which were poking holes at him. When it comes to Matthew Golden, I'm hearing a lot of the same things. I'm hearing, Matthew Golden never had this massive season. Matthew Golden was sort of a player that had the backloaded production for Texas this year.
Yeah.
He still led Texas in touchdown grabs last year. This is still a player that when the biggest games of the season were on schedule for Texas, Golden was dominant. The Arizona State game in the college football playoff, the SEC championship game, the game before against Georgia, was phenomenal, and then was knocked out of the game with an injury in the Ohio State game. So we really don't know how that game would have gone for him.
Sure.
But Golden is going to get the necessary draft capital, and it's a guy that I think it's going to fire. But when I'm looking at a peak outcome for Golden, I like Green Bay. It's sort of a opportunistic wide receiver 1 landing spot for him, where he's not your classic wide receiver 1, but Green Bay is like severely lacking in big play pass catchers. I like Jaden Reed, but it doesn't seem like Matt LaFleur trusts Jaden Reed to be anything more than like a sporadic usage guy. Matthew Golden in Green Bay with Jordan Love as a guy who takes big shots down the field. And Jordan Love, we saw his ability to produce touchdown passes his first season in the league, his first season as a full-time starter there. Sure. I think you put Matthew Golden in that sort of peak Christian Watson role. We're getting excited about it. And I think Matthew Golden could be a guy that could make plays downfield, but he would also get some manufactured looks in that offense. And I think his skill set matches very well with Jordan Love. Green Bay can say all they want, that they don't need a wide receiver 1. I think that's nonsense. I think they're going to actually be a team that's very aggressively looking to add a wide receiver this draft class. I think they either take one in the first round or they take one in the second round. I like Matthew Golden landing in Green Bay.
Okay. I'm going to pretend that you convinced me, and I'm going to voice my prior hesitations to this. And it actually doesn't have anything to do with what you said, because what you said makes all the sense in the world. And it's probably what they're thinking as a front office. My concern is that they have taken the stab at the fast high RAS score potential. I drop a lot of passes guy that's 5'11" to 6'2" range. They've taken a lot of stabs at him, and they just cannot figure out how to get this player consistently involved in their offense. Now, that might be a variety of reasons, right? Christian Watson was, the high end of that spectrum. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. Dobbs has had his issues, of course. Jaden Reed, not quite that prototype, but at least similar athletically. I guess my hope for this offense was that at some point they would take an attack at a traditional X, maybe a Drake London, Mike Evans type. Now, those guys aren't growing on trees, that's for sure. And of course, where they're going to be picking in the draft, they might not have the opportunity to grab maybe the only guy in this draft that fits that profile early.
Ted McMillan was in the building yesterday. So I think there's some late steam on if Tet falls, Green Bay might make a move to get him, or simply he falls to 23. When you talk about like a Drake London type profile, that's probably the closest to it for guys that are going to get round one draft capital. So maybe you get your dream there, and Tet does land there. I personally think that a lot of I think Tet goes before where they pick.
Sure.
I think Tet might go 6, 7 picks ahead of them. So yeah, I agree with you in theory. And
in theory.
I think, in theory, I think that's an ideal spot for them.
Sure. And but you know what? History may favor you here, because perhaps the fourth time is the charm. Certain teams, they have a type and they stick to that type. The Packers, maybe, they're going to look at themselves and say, hey, 1 out of 4 is not bad, especially considering the bones of this team is really built for them to focus on this pass catching group, because they're not far away from being a competitive team here. So I'm going to kick us to a little Dynasty promo, and then we'll get to our last guy, and the guy I am most interested to hear about.
Hey, what if I told you there was a Dynasty app where you could get player lifetime values, evaluate trades, including draft picks out to 2028, compare the advanced metrics of 2 players, look up the sentiment, buy, sell, hold on players? Well, there is a mobile app that has all of that and more, called the Dynasty Dominator, and it's $5 in the App Store on Google Play. This is my gift to you, the most affordable Dynasty League domination app available today. And if you already have it, the 2025 class is ready to download. Let's go.
Let's go, baby. We've got Big Z in the house. He said, stop staring at me, Chuck. Z, I'm going to try and stare at you throughout the entire next segment as we get through and we round out our dream landing spots. We've got Theo in the house. He's absolutely crushing it. Theo, this is a guy, this is your last pick. This is a guy that I was so high on going to the last 3 weeks, and for whatever reason, I can think that the emotional instability that makes me who I am is starting to chirp away at me. However, I do love your landing spots for him. So tell us about your very last dream wide receiver pairing.
Yeah, and I think with Tet McMillan, it's you've been so high on him for so long that I think prospect fatigue starts to set in a little bit.
Sure.
I mean, it happens every year for us with the top of the line guys, because we start really getting enthusiastic about these guys that hit at the Senior Bowl, hit at the NFL Combine, the risers. But Tet's a sure thing when it comes to like a guy that I think is going to hit as a wide receiver in the NFL. McMillan has a great combination of tremendous size, tremendous catch radius, with the ability to handle a exceptional amount of targets. He's not just some big guy you park on the outside and you target him 100 times in the season and you hope he catches a bunch of touchdown passes. I think like completely contrary, he's a guy that certain NFL offensive coordinators are going to build their passing games around if he lands correctly. I think when it's all said and done today, like every single huge name NFL draft prognosticator says Matthew Golden's going 12 to Dallas. I think that could be a smokescreen. I think it could be Tet McMillan 12 overall to Dallas if I had to pick a spot. I think him in the Amari Cooper role opposite CeeDee Lamb, when we talk about like the peak Dak Prescott seasons, that's not a bad outcome for Tet. He would be a 120 target guy, but he would be the clear number 2 target. He'd get advantageous matchups because of the attention that NFL defenses put on CeeDee Lamb. Sure. That wouldn't be the worst outcome for him. But I think there's a couple of other teams when it comes to Tet. We want Tet to end up being a wide receiver 1. I think Carolina is interesting. I think if Carolina trades down, Carolina's in this weird mix because Carolina picks 8 and then they don't pick again until the very end of the second round because of the Bryce Young trade. So I don't know if they necessarily want a 50 spot gap between when their pick. So if they trade down from 8 and somebody trades up and goes and gets their Tyler Warren, goes and gets their, Jalen Walker, one of these guys that's going to go in that range, then I think Carolina for Tet McMillan is probably the nuts landing spot. We look at what wide receiver 1s have done in Dave Canales-led offenses. Talk about that season that Mike Evans is obviously a different kind of player than Tet McMillan, but the season he had in Canales' last year at Tampa Bay as their wide receiver 1. Then we talk about Bryce Young's propensity to hyper target his wide receiver 1, his main target. Adam Thielen. I mean, Adam Thielen's had multiple games of 30+% target share attached to Bryce Young. Was a guy that was very strong to end the season last year. So Carolina, I think, would be a great spot for him. I think the Green Bay, we've talked about, that would be a fantastic spot for Ted McMillan. And I think that's actually in the wheelhouse. But for me, if New Orleans passes on a quarterback and they're really thinking that this could be like Arch Manning next year, maybe they take Tyler Shuck in the second round and they just take Ted McMillan at 9. There's been a lot of positive coach speak when it comes to Chris Olave, Kellen Moore saying all the right things. But Chris Olave's had such problems with the concussions, staying on an NFL team, an NFL field, and it's a guy that's going to be coming up for a contract extension. Not sure that's going to work out there. Rashid Shaheed was a really nice story last year, but not a guy that's a long-term answer for them to be a potential wide receiver 1. I think it could be a situation where New Orleans sort of gets the ecosystem right. They're in tremendous rebuild mode. They get their franchise starter next year in the draft early. They draft a guy like Tyler Shuck in the second round, and they just draft Ted McMillan. I think a year from now, Ted McMillan would be the wide receiver 1 in New Orleans. And then you talk about Ted McMillan playing alongside of Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. You'd have opportunities for Ted McMillan to kick inside and be utilized as a big slot. This is a situation where I think Ted McMillan, it seems like a weird landing spot, but I think dynasty managers would end up getting really excited about it. It's give you the draft capital, gives you the clear path to becoming a wide receiver 1 with an offensive coordinator that we believe in Kellen Moore. And if we look back at some of these peak seasons that guys like Keenan Allen had 2 seasons ago, and obviously all of the wide receiver success in Dallas for those guys, Kellen Moore is a guy that gets wide receiver production. Attach Ted McMillan to him, figure out quarterback down the line, go with Tyler Shuck, and lose a bunch of games this year and put yourself in a position to draft an Arch Manning, a Drew Allar, one of those guys next year.
I love that. And I think you highlighted something early on in that I think I personally would find, and I would hope dynasty managers find as well, is some people might view him to New Orleans as, oh, they already have Chris Olave, when in actuality, it actually probably says more about how they would view Tet and potentially his role as a wide receiver 1 going forward. And Olave maybe in a secondary role, kind of like where Kellen Moore just came from, right? A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. That's certainly he's certainly an offensive mind that's going to understand the value of having 2 strong wide receiving weapons. He just came from the Chargers with Keenan Allen and maybe the last good year of Mike Williams. Before that comes from Dallas with CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. He has been a part of some strong wide receiver rooms. Rashid Shaheed, like you said, a guy we all love. Nobody has a bad thing in the world to say about Rashid Shaheed, but perhaps his role could be found better in 11 personnel. And that's a team that is strapped for cash for several years. And so when you can have a wide receiver on a rookie contract producing at a high level, there's not many better ways to get out of cap hell than having that premium. So I very much enjoy that pick. I think he would be terrific in Carolina as well. I really like the idea of, I don't know what the record is for shortest quarterback to tallest wide receiver as far as gap goes. I would love if anybody in the chat can do some research on that and send it to us. What's the record for that, at least over the course of a career? That would be a fun one. But what do you think about what were some of Bryce Young's most positive traits coming into the league? He was supposed to be an elite processor. And I don't know if there's better ways to process a short looking over the pocket span with a wide receiver that can go up and play volleyball and go up and get jump balls at an 80-20 catch like Ted McMillan. So talk about bailing out your quarterbacks. Talk about fitting into the offenses immediately. I really love those fits. However, Dallas was my favorite. You teed that one up early, and I have to say that's a dream spot for me. I'm tired of the Tolberts. I'm tired of the Turbans. I'm tired of the Brandon Cooks. Jake Ferguson, I've enjoyed his time around here, but he's really the second target earner by default. For fantasy owners, Ted McMillan bag holders, you don't want him to go there perhaps. But as far as, just something I would love, him lining up across CeeDee Lamb would be fun for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's one where we could get excited about it. And again, Tet in that hypercharged wide receiver 2 role in a very consolidated target tree in a very good offense. Yeah, I think there's nothing to dislike about that one.
No, that would be fantastic. And Theo, you have to get some love from Brittany right here. She says, I love to see it.
And a big shout out to Brittany. Brittany's one of the best out there.
Mm.
I loved working with Brittany at Player Profiler, one of my favorite
Mm.
people over there.
No, she's an absolute blast, and she's sniping me an uncomfortable amount in a dynasty startup that we're in right now. But you know what? That's just going to make me stronger for next time. So, Thea, 5 amazing rookie wide receiver landing spots. I cannot thank you enough for bringing the heat. Never doubted it for a second. I want to give you the floor here to shout out where the good people can find you, any projects you have coming up, maybe the last 3 digits on the back of your credit card, all the fun things that all of us like to share around here.
Yeah, no, so big shout out to the Player Profiler audience. Dynasty Life came over with me to Fantasy Points. So some of you were listening to that on the Player Profiler main feed. You've got to subscribe to the Dynasty Life only feed. You can put that anywhere you get your podcasts. I do School of Scott with Scott Barrett every single week, which some of you guys were listening to as well. That's a really fun podcast. But for me, it's Fantasy Football Daily has been sort of the big podcast they gave me when I went over to Fantasy Points. I'm dropping 3 episodes a week. We're covering everything. This time of year, it's a lot like you're doing NFL draft content, but that's going to end up kicking into like a 4 or 5 episodes a week. So it's constant Theo Gremminger podcast right in your ear, Fantasy Football Daily, and then my articles over at Fantasy Points as well. And yeah, big shout out to everything you're doing over here. You're crushing it, man.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. It means a lot. I hope everybody's continuing to ride the train. Theo's putting out a ton of great content over there. So there's room for you to consume all of it. You guys can get off TikTok. You guys can get off Reddit, get off Facebook, come consume all of the content we're putting out. You're going to love it. And we did get an answer. The highest distance between a quarterback and a wide receiver is Davey O'Brien at 5'7" and Harold Carmichael at 6'8". Chet, if I were to rank the people in this episode, Theo, you're at the tippy top. The Roger Goodell behind me on the door is second. Chet finished third, and then I'm going to put myself down here at fourth. It felt like a good rankings. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. Everybody have a great weekend as we roll into the good stuff. I like to ask all my guests to give me a number 1 through 5 so I can get us out of here. What do you got for us?
3.
Cheers, everybody.
No, man. Shit, no, man. I believe you get your ass kicked saying something like that.
All right.